My girlfriend said, "You're not my husband. You don't get a say in where I go or who I'm with." I smiled. "You're right." Until she returned and found all her suitcases and favorite clothes scattered outside. I walked into the bedroom and saw her surrounded by a pile of dresses, shoes, and carefully folded accessories. And that was a moment I realized the line she kept drawing wasn't about independence. It was about removing me from a position of partner and shoving me into the role of a spectator in my own relationship. My name's Daniel, I'm 29, and my girlfriend at the time, Brooke, was 27. We'd been together just under 2 years, long enough for me to believe we were building something real, something future-oriented. She was fiery, confident, stunning, and the kind of woman who walked into a room like she owned it. I loved her intensity. I loved her ambition. But over time, I realized she weaponized her independence, not because she needed freedom, but because she wanted control without responsibility. The fights always felt one-sided. If I asked a question about where she was going, I was controlling. If I expressed concern, I was insecure. If I wanted to make plans together, she called me clingy. Somehow, everything she wanted was empowerment, and everything I wanted was oppression. It built up quietly, slowly, until that night. I walked into the bedroom, and she was standing in front of the mirror, brushing her hair, surrounded by dresses scattered like the backstage of a fashion show. Her makeup bag was open, jewelry cases everywhere, her suitcase on the bed half-packed. I leaned against the doorway and asked, almost casually, "Were you heading tonight? And who are you going with?" She paused only for a second before looking at me through the mirror with that smirk. God, that smirk. And said, "Why do you care?" I answered honestly, "Because I'm your boyfriend." She laughed under her breath, shook her head, and said the sentence that flipped everything upside down. "You're not my husband. You don't get a say in where I go or who I'm with." It was the tone, the dismissiveness, the sheer pride dripping off every syllable. And then she looked at me like she just won an argument I didn't even know we were having. Something inside me snapped, not in a violent way, not in a destructive way, but in that cold, clear moment of revelation when you finally see what's been happening the whole time. I didn't argue. I didn't shout. I didn't pout or beg. I just said, "You're right," and walked out of the room with a calmness I didn't recognize in myself. She didn't even look up. She thought she'd shut me down. She thought she'd won. She had no idea. While she was out getting ready somewhere else, showering, straightening her hair, doing her makeup, I walked back into the bedroom and just stood there staring at the mountain of outfits she had laid out for her big night. Cute, stylish, sexy, expensive, and all chosen with the assumption that I'd just quietly sit at home waiting. So I started with a suitcase. I flipped it open, grabbed handfuls of dresses, and tossed them outside onto the balcony. Some landed on the chair, some onto the floor, some got caught on the railing. The wind did the rest. Then I grabbed the shoes, her heels, her boots, the ones she always bragged about, and carried them outside 2 by 2, lining them up and then knocking them over, letting them scatter across the concrete. I wasn't breaking anything, just exposing it. I wasn't destroying her things. I was ruining the illusion of control she thought she had. Then came the bags. The designer ones she swore she'd worked so hard for, even though she'd guilt me into paying for 2 of them. I didn't damage them. I just gently opened them and emptied them out onto the bed, flipping each item over so she would see that nothing was sacred when respect isn't mutual. By the time she left for her night out, humming and smiling like she had everything under control, I had already finished my quiet masterpiece. And I waited, not angrily, not obsessively, just curiously. And when I heard her key in the door around 1:14 a.m. and the lights flicked on, the silence that followed was so sharp it felt physical. "Daniel!" she screamed, voice cracking immediately. I stayed sitting on the couch, phone in hand, staring at the TV. She stormed into the living room, eyes blazing red, like she'd walked into the aftermath of a robbery. "What did you do?" she yelled, shaking, furious. I stood up slowly, walked past her without speaking, and pointed toward the bedroom. She followed me, still cursing, still stumbling over her words, until she reached the doorway and froze again. Dresses everywhere. Shoes everywhere. Suitcases open like gutted animals. Clothes dangling off the railing outside. Her makeup bag spilled across the bed. And me? Calm. Completely calm. That scared her more than if I'd been screaming. "What is wrong with you?" she shouted, stepping carefully through the chaos like the floor was lava. I leaned against the door frame and said in the quietest, most even tone I've ever used, "You told me I'm not your husband. I don't get a say." So I didn't say anything. I didn't interfere with your plans. I just made sure you had space to be independent. "This isn't independence. This is psychotic," she snapped. "No." I said, "This is what happens when you treat someone you love like an accessory instead of a partner. You go out. You don't tell me where. You don't tell me who you're with. You don't think I deserve a simple explanation. So I decided to match your energy." She put her hands on her head. "You're insane. I can't be with someone controlling like this." That one made me laugh. Actually laugh, because the irony was too wild to ignore. Controlling? I said, "You literally told me I have no right to ask where you go or who you're with. You shut me out emotionally. You make decisions entirely without me. Then you call me controlling because I finally showed you what your disrespect looks like on the outside instead of buried inside me." She stared at me like she didn't know who I was. And honestly, maybe she didn't, because the version of me she knew was patient, quiet, forgiving, willing to bend until I cracked. The version standing in front of her, the one who finally stopped accepting breadcrumbs, that version scared her. "Good. Clean it up," she finally whispered, pointing at her scattered things like she was giving orders. "No," I replied, turning away. "You made the mess in this relationship. You can clean this one." She screamed, loud, furious, desperate, and shoved one of the suitcases off the bed. It thudded onto the floor, sending more clothes flying. Then she stormed past me, grabbed her phone, and locked herself in the bathroom, sobbing loud enough for the whole apartment building to hear. I didn't chase her. I didn't comfort her. I didn't apologize. I just sat on the couch and finally felt peace. The next morning, she tried to guilt trip me, accusing me of abuse, manipulation, control, everything she could think of to avoid admitting the truth. But the thing about emotional manipulation is that once you stop responding to it, it collapses. Within 2 days, she packed the rest of her things and left. No apology, no reflection, no ownership. And that confirmed everything. Because a woman who truly believed she'd been wronged would demand closure. But a woman who knows she pushed someone too far, she just disappears. That was a year ago, and I'm with someone new now. Someone who doesn't weaponize independence. Someone who communicates. Someone who considers my feelings before walking out the door. And sometimes, when people on Reddit ask why men go from calm to cold in a split second, I think back to that night, to her smirk, to her sentence, "You're not my husband. You don't get a say." She was right, and that's exactly why I left.